Welcome, everyone. Thank you, Will. Will, if you haven't met him yet, that's Will Forrester. It's Friendly Water for the World's marketing director. And he's setting this up, and we're still getting the kinks out. We're hoping to do this weekly, and so by next week, it should be better than today, we hope. Also with me is Curt Andino, Friendly Water for the World's executive director. He's waving a little shyly. Wave again. All right, there he is. Okay. And of course, many of you know me, but for those who don't, I'm David Albert, the board chair of Friendly Water for the World. Friendly Water for the World, of course, is a Olympia, Washington-based non-governmental organization. I like to describe us as the non-charity charity because we try to make it possible for people to do things for themselves when possible. And make it possible for all of us to contribute together to building a better world through clean water. And I put up our mission statement online there. Friendly Water for the World's mission is to expand access to low-cost clean water tech and information about health and sanitation through, there's our long list, and we do all of these: knowledge sharing, training, applied research, community building, peacemaking, and efforts at sustainability. And we're here because we know that many of us, our lives are now a bit fragmented as we hopefully are staying very close to home, if not totally in the home. I've barely gone out in the last 2 weeks. And we need to stay connected with each other. And because together we are contributing to a message of engagement, hope, and action, even in these rather difficult and dangerous times. If I had time, I'd love to talk to each of you about how you're doing. We don't at this point, and next week we may have the kinks built out so we can get you all on screen as well, so I can see faces to go with all the names that are here. We're working in about 8 or 9 different countries right now with all of our technologies. And some of our technologies that you'll hear about later are particularly relevant to COVID-19, although they are actually relevant to everybody's lives in the parts of the world in which we work. Our vision, can you move to the next slide? Our vision is of healthy, self-sustaining, empowered, peaceful communities, both here and abroad, sharing our knowledge with each other, with life and hope restored through clean water. And I think that's a rather expansive vision, and I'm glad so many of you have embraced it with us. We hope to give you more opportunities to do so. And I also wanted to note that this year is Friendly Water for the World's 10th anniversary. It's an interesting time to be having a 10th anniversary, let me tell you. Obviously, almost all of our plans have gone down the non-toilet. And new plans are in the making as we go, but the first part of our plan is really to stay connected with all of you folks. And with that, I want to turn it over to Curt Andino.
Thanks, David. Hi. I think first thing I'd like to do is echo David's hello. I hope everyone is okay. I'd like to let you know that here at Friendly Water, we're thinking about everyone who is part of our lives. So that also means you. I personally hope that today and now I find each one of you well and hopefully not too stressed out because together we'll all get through this. So a bit about Friendly Water. What we do is we provide water, sanitation, and hygiene solutions designed especially for marginalized communities. And what that means as far as marginalized goes, people who are politically repressed, who are racially suppressed, people with HIV. Big thing in Africa are people with albinism who are frequently victimized in India, we can talk about the Dalits, a low caste, as well as many other low caste communities and societies in India. Um, but also things that have not because of who you are, but what's happened, such as a handicap. If you are a sexual assault survivor and have been excluded from your community, if you're an orphan, frequently refugees, as well as IDP, which is internally displaced people, um, minority tribes, going back to the way you have been named. So yes, we work with people who are on the outskirts of society, if not literally, certainly how they are socially recognized, and we do this throughout the world, but mainly in East Africa, India, and soon in Guatemala. Um, the way we do it is, I think, unique and fascinating. We do this through knowledge sharing, as well as hand-in-hand training. So rather than sending somebody a pamphlet, or asking somebody else to tell somebody else how to do something, we figure out a way to go there with experts in hand, and along with tools and materials, and we find people that are interested in learning what we have to share. And I'll get to what we share here in a little bit. But I think almost as importantly as what we do is how we do it. The end goal is to get our community partners in a position to utilize our fairly simple technologies to improve their own lives and change their outcomes that normally they have probably thought were predetermined. By doing so, we create new friends, stronger communities, and most importantly, hope. And as important as that, we also make a very strong statement that you are not alone. We are all in this together. Just like I had said earlier about COVID, even more so for the groups that we have worked with for 10 years now. We recognize the fact that indisputably we are all in this together. And the way we do this is the way we approach a community, and the way we train in our technologies is a four-step method. And the first is, after receiving an invite from that community, we ask them to fill out a community survey, which gives us basic information about who to talk to, who we are talking to, where they're located, if there's a road that's paved when we get there, or if there's going to be a bumpy road, or if there's going to be no road. This helps us in our planning. If there's community health workers, if there are schools, if there's a political system or a tribal system, what their dispute resolution methods are. There's a whole wealth of knowledge that we can just get on a piece of paper. And that's great, but that's a first step. The second step is our community engagement, where either our representatives or ourselves travel to the community that has requested our assistance, and we talk with them. And I know that might sound very simple, but it's also very strange in a world where very little one-on-one communication does occur between the provider and the recipient. We think that that's where the magic is, the beauty is, and the world of Friendly Water exists, is in that interaction with the individual. So we go there and we provide a community engagement time. And what we do there is we use a concept called appreciative inquiry, which is focused on what people already have, and that everything they have is of worth, and including themselves, and that by focusing on their strengths, we will build a more powerful tool. Combined with that, and very similar to that, is the notion of asset-based community development, which is finding things in that community that are going to be of particular relevance to the work that we do. And that can be very simple. Let's just look at unemployment. So if you go into a community that experiences high unemployment, you can say, well, wow, you people really need jobs. And as soon as you say you need, you're describing an absence, and you're describing a lack of something which they weren't able to provide for themselves. And it creates a negative tone. So Friendly Water doesn't see high unemployment as a need that needs to be fixed. We see it as an asset. We see that there's going to be an available workforce to have jobs to produce the technologies that we train in. And then we actually do our training, which is going into a community with our professionalized trainers. And depending on what the particular technology is, but let's say biosand filters, we come in with our trainers, we come in with the molds to produce the filters, we come in with materials to produce at least one filter for everybody who's undergoing the training, and surplus materials to do more of it once we're done. And we leave all this behind. So we leave tools behind, we leave materials behind, and we leave knowledge behind. And the goal there is that they will then take these and utilize them to their community's best benefit as they self-determine the role that they want their community to have. And that can be in how they prioritize the technologies. We have 7, but how they can prioritize the technologies that we bring. And what we're finding right now is people want water catchments, bricklaying, brick making machines, and biosand filters. And when we're done with this, we leave behind a Friendly Water for the World coach. And that's generally one of the people who have gone through the training, is a member of the community, hopefully a well-regarded, if not respected member of the community, but somebody who has a bit of gumption and the ability to go out and check up on how the work that we have taught is progressing. So going to a house that has a biosand filter and making sure that that biosand filter is set up properly, has the right amount of sand, has the diffuser plate at the right height, has a tube that comes out at the right length, that water is moving through it at the right speed. And the reason we call it coach is because these people are here to help, not to tell, but to coach people into how to make these things work to their best benefit. But they can also go down to the production center where the filters are being made and make sure that there are enough materials, and if there aren't enough materials, to find out why. But the key to all of this is that they have a smartphone, which, you know, how would we get through life without one? And this allows them to rapidly connect with us so that we can provide solutions to them in real time, but then we can also learn about their successes in real time. By having this constant level of communication with the people that we work with, our partners, it's allowed us to learn a lot of things. Recently, we've been learning that the one technology that people really desire is our brick making machine, which is in soil stabilized brick. And while I'm talking about that, why don't we just talk about the platform that we bring? Will, could you pop that up?
Yeah, keep talking while I do that one.
Keep talking. Lord have mercy. What's neat about this platform is that a couple of years ago, we only had one thing on our platform, and then that grew to 2 because we had the biosand filter, which cleans the water, but what they didn't have any water to clean, which led us to the water catchment tank. And then that goes on and on and on, where we start addressing basic needs that people in our communities are going to have. So while we started with water, we kind of quickly moved into sanitation with a microflush toilet, and then we moved into hygiene with soap. But I think we focus on basic needs, and as you'll see in the friendly platform, these are things that are considered to be basic building blocks for a successful life. I see something happening.
Do you see a friendly platform?
I do. Thank you so very much. So if you look at this, it starts off saying that, what I'd already talked about. This is for folks who are marginalized and disadvantaged, and then this is something that Will had written, which I think really gets to the core of why we are there with these folks, is because they're denied and excluded from these basic building blocks of creating a foundation for their own future. And yes, some of the places we go to, they only have a lack of clean water, but a lot of places, if not almost every place, has more than one of these things as an absence. So us being able to provide these things together, I think, is an excellent starting place for people who don't have this. So as I had said, we have our biosand filter, very effective. It's 3,000-year-old technology put into a box. If used correctly, the health impacts are profound. The next item is our, and you'll have plenty of time to ask questions when we're all done with this. Next, we have the interlocking soil stabilized brick. This is a very interesting device because you're just compressing. You're using force to replace heat as far as creating a dense, sturdy structural object. And since you're using dirt, which is generally found under your feet or not too far away, with sometimes only the need for a small amount of cement added, it's an incredibly effective and efficient way to create structural building materials. And also, you're not burning down forests in order to fire a kiln. A rocket stove is mainly aimed at communities that have brought their traditionally outdoor three-stone fire inside. One of the most remote communities we're going to be going to in Simwatachella, they don't have any indoor cooking because it doesn't make any sense to them because, as they say, you get all this smoke. Well, in some of the more urbanized areas where it's looked down upon to be cooking outside, people take your basic three-stone fire and they bring it inside. And we've had a whole bunch of pictures where you just see smoke pouring out of a house. So we've we've brought a rocket stove into our friendly platform. It greatly reduces the amount of material that is used for cooking and burns much hotter and much quicker. Our microflush toilet is this is a vermicomposting, which means worm composting, but we will build a couple of different types. Is simply a way to not be using open defecation or to be scraping a hole in the ground when you defecate, or to be using a large communal pit latrine. All of those things are just vectors for all the diseases that we work to eradicate in the groups that we work with. After that, you see the ferrocement rainwater catchment tanks, which we really just call a water catchment tank. What we're seeing more and more is not only a lack of clean water, but a scarcity of water itself. When water is coming down, especially in East Africa now, rather than coming down consistently through 2 rainy seasons, one 3 months, one about 6 weeks, we're getting one rainy season, which is small, and the water comes down in deluge. So the concept is to catch as much water as possible, hence the water catchment. Permaculture, and especially the permagarden. Thank you so much, Peter Jensen, who is the originator of the permagarden and runs an organization called Terra Firma, who we frequently partner with, that just does fantastic things with small plots of land. And by using the small plot of land efficiently and effectively, people can produce 100%, 150, 200% more crops than they normally would, thereby allowing greater sustenance provided for by your own work, rather than having to spend money on food that you can grow outside of your house. And our last and very topical technology is soap making. We realize that, yes, it's fantastic to have clean water in your kitchen, and you're washing your vegetables from your permagarden, and that you have a microflush toilet over here. But please wash your hands before going from your microflush toilet to your kitchen. And the way you do that is by providing people not only with water, but with soap. So that's a quick overview of our technologies. I wanted to very quickly move to COVID-19. I'm sure we'll all have a particular website that we're going to see what the status is. The one that we have been using is from Johns Hopkins Center for Systems Science and Engineering, which I think is probably the most updated and accurate one out there right now. And you can see, and this is only for point of illustration, you can see the amount of density of COVID in Europe and the eastern U.S. By comparison, you see very little in Africa. Very, very soon, Africa, a place that has very little infrastructure, has quite a dependency upon human interaction, where we're listening to the radio and the television for our facts. Facts are largely transmitted in East Africa, person by person, not because that's the only way to move a fact, but that's the only way facts are trusted, is when it goes through the grapevine as opposed to the government telling you something. So India already has a extremely high level of COVID showing up. But the reason I wanted to show you all this map was because whatever is happening here now, in a society of 330 million people, is going to be impacting India with 1.3 billion and Africa with another 1.2 to 1.3 billion people, in a much more dramatic and frankly negative way. And to discuss that, I think I would like to turn this back over to David so he can talk a little bit about the health impacts in the developing communities that we work with.
Thank you, Curt. So the first thing I wanted to say is that we are experiencing what we think of as trauma. Yes, we're having way too many deaths. Many, our hospitals are filled. There aren't enough ventilators, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. The people we deal with around the world live trauma every day. I joke that, the people we work with do not have post-traumatic stress syndrome. They have trauma syndrome. It's ongoing. I'm talking with my friends in Congo, and they're all scared to death of coronavirus. They've had 6,000 deaths from measles and 250,000 cases in the past year. There's cholera in the communities we talk with in India. By the way, the government will tell you that there are no cases of cholera in those places, but our people who are working there are witnessing deaths every day. So this is kind of what we need to talk about in terms of the communities we work with. The first thing I wanted to say is our main strategy right now, for better or for worse, is self-isolation in place. So this photo comes from Tanzania. It comes from right in the center of Tanzania, the Simanjiro region, a Maasai region, and this is her home. So imagine being told to self-isolate in place for 3 weeks or 3 months or whatever. Now, of course, this hut you see here is one of about 30 arranged in a semicircle of one kind or another, and there are animals too. But all life that goes on is communal. The idea that somebody would sit inside this hut for 3 weeks is a non-starter. Next slide, please. So, this is an Indian train today. So, when the government began to tell people to self-isolate and businesses began to shut down, there are 30 to 40 million, actually no one really knows the count, of migrant workers who come from the countryside and work in the cities. They may work as carriers, they may work as auto rickshaw drivers, they may work as maids, they work in all kinds of different occupations. And when the virus hit and the businesses started to close up and people started to close up their homes, these folks have no place to go. They have no food, they have no money. And so began this crazy trek of 30 to 40 million people trekking from the cities to their ancestral homes where maybe there is some food to eat. They're traveling through India. The train systems have been cut radically, but there are still some trains. It's almost you can see it would be almost impossible to get on a train like this. But this is what the trains look like. And it's 30 to 40 million people moving around the country. Some are walking 300 to 400 miles to try to get home. And if there is any disease, COVID-19, we're about to see a massive explosion of the disease, and it will be all over the place because everyone is going to a different location. Next one. So this is a refugee camp in New Delhi. These are Rohingya Muslim refugees, and they are living in a depression in the earth. I took this picture myself. I visited here, actually had tea here. Nobody is going to help them. They live within 5 kilometers of every major charity in the world. In the 8 years they've been there, they have not been visited by a single one of them. The government doesn't want them there at all. Many of them had been auto rickshaw drivers. There's no work to be had anymore. So they're living there without clean water, without food, and with no place to go. They couldn't go back to their home villages. Next slide, please. So this is a Rohingya Muslim refugee camp about 70 kilometers south of New Delhi. Again, these folks came from Burma about most of them 7 or 8 years ago. They built this refugee camp themselves. No one built it for them. No international charity came. There's no health clinic there, but they needed a place where they could hang their hats, as it were. And this was it. This is camp number 4 in Mewat. I have visited there twice. Friendly Water has a biosand filter program going on in this community. Next slide. So here's another picture of Camp 4. Every single child in this community was sick. In this camp of 42 families, they were losing a child every 2 to 3 months, usually from cholera or typhoid. I'm happy to report that there are no cases of cholera or typhoid in this camp anymore as a result of the work of biosand water filters. People have said in this picture they've never seen me look so sad in my entire life, and I think that was probably true. Next slide. So here are the pictures of the kids in Camp 4 in Mewat. So if you think it's hard for us, again, they live in these very crowded conditions. There's no place to go. There's no work to be had. There's no extra money, and there's no health care. So you can imagine how ripe for diseases like COVID a place like this could possibly be. And the government has no interest in them whatsoever. I think I have one more slide. Yeah, okay, so finally, these are women in Simanjiro, Tanzania. These women used to be getting up at 3 a.m. and they would walk or take donkeys for 9 hours to get water every single day. And if a child was sick and they had to take a child to the clinic, there'd be no water in the home. It's gotten worse because of global climate change. Women are now getting up at 11 p.m. They usually take their 8 and 9-year-old kids with them, the girls, who they take out of school for this purpose, with them to gather water every single day. Imagine your life getting up for water at 11 p.m., returning at noon, and then trying to live the rest of their lives together. Point being is you say, oh, wash your hands with soap. Well, you have to walk up to 13 hours to get that water. And soap, forget it. Except that we have now trained this community, you'll hear about later, to make friendly soap. Lives of the people we are working with are just filled with uncertainty, filled with ongoing daily trauma. And I have to say, I'm proud of the technologies we've introduced to these communities, and they work. But you know, the thing I'm most proud of and proud of you for is you've chosen to walk alongside these folks. Somebody from the outside at least is taking account of what is going on with them in their communities. And I'm privileged to continue to be able to do so. These people are where they are because they were born into this condition. It wasn't anything they chose. It wasn't anything we would choose for ourselves. But given those conditions, the least we can do is walk alongside them. Curt, I'm going to turn it back to you.
Yeah, I think just to follow up about what you were showing in India, in Africa, you know, it's very much the same situation. A village we're planning on going into soon in Simwatachela, Zambia. 80% of the kids don't go to school because they spend their day lugging water. And if you're going to ask somebody then to wash their hands for something that they just spent half their day procuring versus watering your cabbage patch or drinking it yourself, you know, that's quite a challenge. So here we see this is right up the road from Simwatachela. Well, right up the road there. We're probably talking about 5 hours away. Is a group of people in Manze who are building a water catchment tank, and this is also in Zambia, and it's a great way to fight against water scarcity. Here they are completing it. They've actually chosen, and this is through our community engagement process, letting them identify where these technologies go. The Friends of Manze, which is a nonprofit in Wales that helps support the Zambia Women and Girls Foundation in Zambia, in Manze, asked that all of their water catchments go to schools. So here you see a bunch of little ones outside of a newly completed tank outside of one of their local schools. We built 2 of them there, showing them how it works, and now they are putting together funds for an additional, I think 12. They have 7 schools. Each school gets 2, so we've done 2, so they have 12. And now they've been empowered. They've been shown how to do this. They are working with their partner group, Friends of Manze, and this is exactly what we're trying to encourage. We have another project, as I said, coming up in Simwatachela in just hopefully in just 3 or 4 months. After that, we have been asked to go into a town called Binga, which is in Zimbabwe, which is about as rural as Simwatachela, which Simwatachela is about 75 kilometers off the main road, and then the road you take to get there is not really a road. So we're constantly being asked to go to new places, and we are trying to support this work even in this arguably very difficult time. So with that in mind, I really want to thank our sustaining donors. And I know that I'm talking to many of our sustaining donors right now. So you have my sincere thank you. And you can also help us by talking about our work. If you wanted to tell your friends to join us on these chats, we have some more coming up. Our next chat is going to be where we are and where we've been and how we've gotten to where we are today. A chat after that is going to be focused on the technologies themselves, a bit more of an explanation. We'll have our project manager in talking about that. We're going to do a chat just on entrepreneurship. David will be doing a chat just on India. And we'll be sending out info for that. We'll be sending out something for that very, very soon. So thank you all very, very much for joining us today. I will ask David to give us some of his final thinking. I think he's a good person to end with, and then we'll take your questions. So thank you all again very, very much.
Thank you. Am I on, Will?
You are.
Okay. Can I just go through the few slides I've got here?
Go right ahead.
Okay. So at the same time, we work in the Congo, Eastern Congo, very difficult place to work. In one of the communities we went into, after teaching them to build biosand filters very successfully, we said, and when you must wash your hands with soap. And the community asked, what is soap? So, but in Congo, this is in Goma, city of 1 million or 2 million people, depending on how many refugees there are at any particular time. These women are survivors of sexual assault and rape from the militias that have gone through, and sometimes by their own government troops. And they've started this wonderful soap making project. Will, next slide. These are the women and holding out the soap. The interesting thing that you don't think about is the hardest thing to get a hold of, besides the raw materials, are the containers. The containers, if you had to buy them wholesale, which you couldn't do in Congo, you would have to go all the way to Rwanda, to Kigali to buy them. They'd be very expensive and they would make the soap unaffordable. So they've started a recycling program to take the plastic waste of containers like these and to turn them into soap containers. Next one. This, I love this picture. This is in Simanjiro, again, in central Tanzania, Maasai women who were trained to build the biosand filters, the rainwater catchment systems, and here they are making soap. They're making actually some bar soap. Mostly they're making liquid soap. But it's a very successful project going on in central Tanzania. I have to tell you, the project of making soap in our terms cost almost nothing. I think it was about $650 to make the soap. The catchment systems, the raw materials usually will cost around $1,200. Will, do you have those final two India shots?
I do.
Please. In India, we're just starting work on rainwater catchments, and this is similar to the ones you've seen in Africa before. We built this at our center in Gandhigram in rural India, a place I've been going for 43 years. We have a center there for training, and we're teaching people to build them. But you may have remembered that shot of the woman in a grass hut. You could never capture water from the roof of a grass hut. So much of India today is becoming a desert. And when I do my India presentation, I'll talk a lot about that. But we said, if you're living in a country that is becoming a desert, what would you do? You would learn from the desert people. Next slide, please. In Rajasthan, this is the Thar Desert. They get 8 to 10 inches of rain a year, and they get it all within a 3-week period. And they have to gather enough water in 3 weeks to last them the entire year. And over 1,000 years, they've come up with various and sundry technologies to to do that. This is called a tanka, and basically they contour the earth so that the water flows into this tanka, which is usually about 12 feet deep, part above ground, part below ground. They capture the water there. I'd originally gone there because the water, as you can imagine, becomes bacterial soup very quickly. And we taught people to build biosand filters right by the sides of them. But now we're doing an exchange where they are beginning to train our people all over we hope all over India, to use the desert technologies in other parts of India. I know Ajmat is on this call. He actually went as our representative to Rajasthan to learn these technologies. We have chosen 2 places in India, one of which is Ajmat's own villages, in a very rural area called Umaria, where what we call forest people, Adivasis, live, and another place called Nalanda School Academy. It's a place where they are training Dalit, quote, untouchable youth who are very gifted but don't have proper education to be trained so they can go on to universities, but they have no water. And so that's one of the things I'm hoping we're going to be doing within the next year. So this kind of gives you a sense of what we're involved in. I'm going to open it up to questions in a second, but I just want to say, first of all, thank you to all of you who are supporting us financially and emotionally. We are not stopping our work. A lot of the work will be delayed, but we're not quitting work. The needs out there are great. And our friends there, the number of friends we have around the world is great, and we don't want to lose them. We'd like to ask those of you who aren't already to become sustaining members of Friendly Water for the World. The hardest part of any organization is not the project funding, but the funding that keeps the doors open. And you can't raise that kind of money from foundations. And so, to keep our people active and working, I see Eric is here from Kenya. Eric is our representative in the field in East Africa. And in order to keep his lights on and whatever, we need to keep funds come in. So monthly donations are very much appreciated. And then tell your friends about us. This is the first of what we hope to be many chats. We're going to have them on different subjects. This was sort of a test run. We only sent this invitation to our supporters, but we have an entire international list that in the 3rd week, we're going to open up this to a much, much larger community. So thank you for being part of our first test. Someday we'll make it run better. I'm sure Will and I and Curt will be talking about that, but thank you so much. And you can type your questions in now.
Actually, if you have a question, I'm having difficulty activating more than the 3 video feeds. So if you have a question and you'd like to be on the screen, you can just let me know, and I can activate individual cameras. And so you could raise your hand and I'll pick you, or you can type your question in the chat. It's up to you. Actually, Peter, did you have a question? No, we can see you talking, but we can't hear you. You have to turn your microphone on. Nope, not yet. You're turned on here. You can type your question. Go right ahead. Oh, okay. Carol's got a question. What are the current projects that are in the training phase at this time? Curt, did you want to address that?
Well, yeah, we have finished up Monze, so it's not in the training phase. As I said, we have 4 different stages that consist of a single project. So as far as active training, we probably have a few active events going on in India, probably both Benjamin and I'm not sure, but maybe Ajmat, and I'll have David speak to that in a second. But in Africa right now, we have completed our trainings in Rwanda and Uganda. We are beginning to start the process in um, northeastern Tanzania with the community survey for the Mara region. We are beginning to start a new project in Goma in the Congo. David was showing pictures of that earlier. They are moving into the community engagement. We have a new ground partner. Our first and oldest partner is CPG RBC, which is 6 French words, and I have no idea what they are. But we have been working with both Zawadi Nakuze and her assistant Aristote Luba Mbawe for many years, and they are now partnering with another ground level NGO. So we're hoping to have that underway probably in the next couple of months. As I had mentioned, we're waiting for the pandemic to pass before we can start Simwatachela, which was scheduled for this upcoming July, August. And that is going down to the tribal region of Simwatachela, which is a few thousand square miles, and working with some individual villages. And we'd be bringing in water catchment, biosand filter, and brick making machines, starting with the village of Subuli. And hopefully that's going to be July or August. And that will be followed up by going to Zimbabwe to start in Binga. That's at the front end. We have a community survey out for that right now. We also have a community survey that has been completed and returned to us from Guatemala, an area called Cantel, which is about an hour and a half north of Lake Atitlan. For those of you who know where Lake Atitlan is, but it's a very high region. We are in the formative stages of getting ready to send a community survey to Colombia to work with a group in Catatumbo. And we're planning on leveraging that through a university in Bogota with a gentleman, Elmer Diaz, who had been to our training this last August up in Anacortes. So it's very interesting that, you know, we meet Elmer. Elmer knows about a group in Colombia. They're working with another group that can help us help them. And it all comes together. So hopefully that will be underway soon. Elmer, if you're online still, hi, how are you? And then, as I had started off, we had finished Monze, and we now have our Friendly Water for the World coach doing the final stages of our project. And the goal is once the project is done, it becomes a community program. And when it becomes a community program, it is overseen by Eric Lajodi, who, as David had mentioned earlier, is our programs manager, who lives in Kakamega, Kenya. So long way to answer that question, but that's where we are, Carol.
That's great. Any other questions? Peter was mentioning that there would be an opportunity for him to talk about terra firma, which I think is a great idea. Does anybody else have any other questions? There's some folks typing, so we'll just wait a second. Curt, do you want to answer that question from Krishna? Do you all have an organization chart or annual report? If we actually, Curt or David, if we want to get a picture of the whole organization and its budget.
Yeah, at the moment, we don't have an annual report because we are in such a dynamic state right now as how we're rapidly expanding our services. Our organizational budget, we pretty much threw out the window last week. So we are working on redoing our budget to deal with the current circumstances. But as far as how does the organization look as far as the chart goes, well, we have our board of directors, and within the board of directors, we have an executive committee, which is made up out of the board chair, which is David. Connie Vasic is our vice chair. Denny Kautzman is our treasurer, and Dave Henry is our secretary. And they provide guidance and oversight and policy approval for me and my staff. And my staff is myself as the executive director. Wayne Madrud is our projects manager. William Forrester is our marketing and communication manager. Heather Avery is our finance and administrative manager. And as I had said earlier, Eric Lajodi is our programs manager, currently located just in Africa. We'll eventually have a programs manager for India as well. So it's a very small group here because we want to have most of our focus on the work that we're doing overseas. And I think if I was to talk about our organization as I just did, what I talked about is about this big. What we have overseas is the rest of the pyramid, which are just numerous contacts, many friends, literally Quaker friends, but also just friends and acquaintances. These are the people who we rely upon to get us information from the ground, who carry out a lot of the work that we actually do. So it's a large organization that has its especially dense center located here in Olympia, Washington. So thank you for your question.
Okay.
So, Will, can you put me on?
You're on.
Am I on? Okay. I saw a couple of questions there. Our budget last year was around something like $640,000. I must say, and that reflects all of our costs, but it also reflects only essentially the U.S. costs. And we have found that when the projects are successful, each dollar we spend abroad will generate between $10 and $14 in the local community. But that's not included in our budget. And the way I think of it is the best way to increase our budget in the larger sense of the term is to continually work for the projects to be more and more effective on the ground. We had expected a significant increase this year. We have now put that on hold. The executive committee says, no, we've got to redo the budget given current realities, although we hope that our donors will continue to be very generous to us. And they have been in the past, but we know that times are changing at this point. Elizabeth Thompson, I think it was you asked a very interesting question, whether the engagement processes we're asking for can act as filters and I would have added, against precisely those people we're trying to work with? And the answer to that is it could, but luckily, not luckily, because we recruit folks, we have some amazing, amazing people on the ground. I'm thinking here, and we've got some of them actually on this chat. Ajmat in central India. I was also thinking specifically of Binyamin in north central India. He works out of Luck now, but he works with extremely poor communities. There's one community that are called the rat eaters. That's lucky when they can catch them. These are extreme, and last report that I got from him just yesterday was that they've now been reduced to eating grass because of this situation. But the interesting thing is, when you go into a community with people who are knowledgeable and have also inspired respect, mutual respect and understanding, even the poorest communities find that they actually have extraordinary assets. They just have never thought of them as that. We find that everywhere we go. I was with a community where, this is in southeast India, where they had made some filters, and they had this community that was up on a hillside, and they couldn't get filters to them, and they were suffering from various waterborne illnesses, and they couldn't afford to get a truck. And then finally said, "Oh, I know my cousin. He's a policeman." And he went and just asked the local policeman, and the local policeman came out with 3 trucks, and they carried the filters up the hill. You know, this was an asset in the community. They just hadn't thought about it before. And we find things like that all the time in these communities. The hardest part is getting folks out of simply thinking of themselves as needy, rather than thinking of themselves as partners. That's the key. If people begin to think of themselves as partners who have something to bring to the table, our experience is that you can do amazing things.
Okay. Any other questions?
Just echo real quick. If I can just jump in here for a second, Will. If you want to know more about the style that we use when we work with folks, there's 2 paradigms. The first is called asset-based community development, which I had mentioned earlier, which is exactly what David was saying, is if we just slightly scratch under the surface, you find unbelievable assets that people simply don't recognize. And the second one is called appreciative inquiry, and that is simply a means of it's a tool to scratch the surface. So we use both of those whenever we talk to a community. And so in answer to the question from Krishna, I would suggest that no, we don't filter anything. In fact, the questions that we ask actually increase the amount of response, the answers that we get, which might make our work more, it makes it harder and it makes it more challenging. But it's incredibly important because, as David says, we're now looking for long-term effectiveness. And this is getting people to be not working for me, not talking about need, but working with me and talking about what they have is such a powerful way to get people positively involved. Thank you.
Okay, if there aren't any other questions, I think we've gone just a little bit over time, but thanks everyone for staying connected and participating. I'm going to leave it to David to say a few last words, but just so everyone knows, we'll definitely be having more chats. We've already mentioned that. We'll get the video sorted out, so if folks want to see each other, so make sure you come next time so you get to see the faces to some of the questions. We'll get that working. And we'll have a schedule put together so you can know what's coming up and hopefully get that on your calendar. And we've really enjoyed chatting with everybody. David, if you wanted to say a last word or two.
Well, thank you so much. I wish I could see all your faces. I see so many old friends on here, and some who I've had communications with for years and years and years, but I've never seen your face. You've seen mine. I didn't break the camera, I hope. Um, uh, right. My wife Ellen says specifically hi to David Fink, who is here. I have at least two friends here on this list that I've known since 1973. I see Judy Babcock Friedman there and David Fink, both of whom I knew in 1973. It's amazing what happens when you get old. Except I'm not feeling old these ways. I'm feeling excited. And I hope I've been able to share some of that excitement with you. Come back next week, same time, same place, with pictures.
That's right. Thanks, everybody. Oh, Judy says it was 1974.
Oh. I actually think she's wrong, but she may be right. It's a long time ago.
Okay. Well, thanks everybody for joining us.
Everybody.
We'll see you next week.